In 1494, two kingdoms sat down to divide a world they had not seen. Spain and Portugal approved the Treaty of Tordesillas, drawing an imaginary line through the Atlantic and assigning newly encountered lands to either side. The line followed no mountain, river, language, or people. It crossed open water and inhabited territories whose societies were absent from the room. No indigenous ruler signed the agreement. No village voted. Sailors could not place it precisely at sea. Yet on parchment, the planet had been cut into zones of ownership. This was the frightening maturity of the map. A drawing was no longer only a memory of where something was. It had become a declaration of who could possess it. Today, maps feel harmless. They glow on dashboards and tell us where to turn. But their history is also the history of converting land into territory, territory into property, and property into power. A line can look thin and innocent. Behind it may stand courts, armies, taxes, ships, and laws. Spain and Portugal did not invent that authority in 1494. They inherited it from ancient attempts to make space visible. To understand how ink became strong enough to divide continents, we have to return to a small piece of clay. More than 2,000 years before that treaty, a Babylonian scribe pressed a world into a tablet small enough to hold in one hand. The object, now called the Babylonian map of the world, places Babylon near the center, marks the Euphrates, names surrounding regions, and encloses the known world within a circular body of water. Beyond it lie mysterious outer lands, partly geographical and partly imagined. To modern eyes, the tablet appears inaccurate. Its scale is uneven. Myth and geography share the same surface. But accuracy was not its only purpose. It answered a deeper question. How can the mind contain a world larger than one life can travel? Communities knew landscapes through movement, memory, and story. A river bend led to water. A hill marked a boundary. A route survived because one traveler taught it to another. The map changed that. It detached spatial knowledge from the body carrying it. A route could outlive the traveler. A place could be discussed by someone who had never stood there. The tablet did not merely show a world. It showed Babylon's place within that world. This is the first hidden truth of cartography. Every map selects a center, an edge, and a meaning. But before maps could govern territory, they had to make distance measurable. Greek geographers pushed that transformation forward. Instead of describing a place only as beyond a mountain or 3 days from a port, they imagined the Earth as a surface organized through geometry. Observations and travel reports fed into the work associated with Claudius Ptolemy. His geography described thousands of locations and explained how a spherical world might be represented through coordinates and projections. It contained errors, but the system mattered more than any single mistake. A location could now exist inside an abstract grid. Space was becoming calculable. The Romans turned spatial knowledge toward movement through empire. Their roads carried soldiers, officials, tax revenue, messages, and goods. The Tabula Peutingeriana, a surviving medieval copy of an ancient road diagram, stretches the Roman world into a long strip. Seas shrink. Land bends. Connections matter more than recognizable shapes. It looks strange because it is not trying to show the Earth as the eye would see it. It shows the empire as a network. For a courier, the crucial question was which road led to the next station and how authority could move. This is how mapping supported civilization at scale. It turned distant towns into parts of one administrative machine. Orders traveled farther. Taxes could be collected more regularly. Armies moved with greater confidence. A useful map did not need to resemble the land perfectly. It needed to make the land manageable. But maps also told people what the world meant. The medieval period is often described as an age when Europeans forgot how to make proper maps. The story is usually told as a decline from Greek reason into religious fantasy. But that is not what really happened. Many Christian world maps were not failed road atlases. They were visual histories. Jerusalem might sit at the center while biblical events, distant peoples, kingdoms, and sacred geography occupied the same surface. These maps explained where humanity stood inside a divine story, not how to steer a ship through a storm. Elsewhere, different traditions served different institutions. In 12th century Sicily, al-Idrisi assembled reports for Roger II's court, describing Europe, Africa, and Asia with remarkable breadth. In China, maps supported administration, military planning, historical memory, and the management of enormous territories. Grids, rivers, roads, and provinces helped officials imagine regions they might never visit. The lesson is not that one civilization found the true map while others remained confused. Societies mapped what they needed to see. Priests mapped sacred history. Courts mapped influence. Administrators mapped provinces. Pilgrims mapped holy routes. Merchants mapped exchange. A map is a machine for choosing what matters. Then maritime trade intensified, and a new pressure changed cartography again. At sea, an error could become a disaster. A coastline drawn badly could cost a ship, its cargo, and every life aboard it. The map was becoming commercial technology. In Mediterranean ports, sailors and chartmakers produced documents now called portolan charts. Their surfaces were crowded with coastal names, harbors, islands, compass directions, and lines radiating across the sea. They can look decorative. They were anything but. They stored accumulated experience. A dangerous cape, a reliable harbor, or the direction between two ports could be preserved and reused. For merchants, this knowledge was money. A vessel might carry cargo worth more than the ship itself. Reaching the correct market before arrival could mean profit. Reaching no port at all could destroy a family's fortune. Geographic knowledge became an asset. States and trading powers guarded charts, questioned pilots, collected logs, and tried to control information about coastlines and winds. Useful things have a dangerous destiny. Eventually, someone tries to own them. As European ships pushed farther into the Atlantic and around Africa, reports from voyages entered royal archives and map-making workshops. A newly recorded bay could become a naval advantage. A corrected route could shorten a voyage. An island placed on a chart could become a target. The map did not merely follow exploration. It organized the next expedition and transformed rumors into plans. Once rulers saw that maps could guide wealth, they saw that maps could guide conquest. The instrument that protected sailors was becoming a blueprint for empire. By the early 16th century, European mapmakers were assembling a world that expanded with every returning ship. Coastlines appeared, shifted, and acquired new names. In 1507, Martin Waldseemüller's printed world map used the name America for lands across the Atlantic, honoring Amerigo Vespucci. Waldseemüller later appeared to reconsider the decision, but reproduction gave the label a life beyond its creator. A name selected in a workshop became attached to continents filled with nations that had named themselves and their landscapes long before Europeans arrived. This is another form of cartographic power. Naming can make possession feel natural. Once a place is renamed, colored, and placed beneath a royal emblem, conquest begins to resemble administration. The Treaty of Tordesillas now reveals its full meaning. Its line was drawn while European geographic knowledge remained incomplete. But as coastlines filled the page, the line became a framework for claims, voyages, and colonial rivalry. Maps did not create imperial violence alone. Ships, weapons, disease, forced labor, and law did that. But maps allowed distant rulers to imagine conquered territories as connected pieces of one project. A river could become a border before local communities had heard of the kingdom claiming it. By the way, if you have made it this far, you probably see the pattern. This channel is not really about objects. It is about the systems hiding inside them. So if that kind of history interests you, subscribe. Now, back to the strange part. Naming distant lands was one kind of power. Controlling the image through which generations imagined the planet was another. In 1569, Gerardus Mercator published a world map built around a projection that would become famous. Its purpose was practical. A sailor following a constant compass bearing could represent that course as a straight line. For navigation, this was enormously useful. But flattening a globe always requires distortion. On Mercator's projection, regions near the poles grow dramatically larger than those near the equator. Greenland can appear comparable to Africa, although Africa is many times larger. This produced the accusation that Mercator deliberately enlarged Europe to celebrate its power. The truth is more complicated. The distortion came from the mathematical purpose of the projection, not from a simple plan to glorify one continent. But the consequence became political when a specialized navigation tool escaped its original context. It entered classrooms, government offices, newspapers, and public imagination. Millions learned the world through an image designed for sailors. Northern countries looked visually dominant while equatorial regions appeared smaller. The object had not changed. The system around it had. A technical compromise became a cultural default. Most viewers were never told what the map preserved or sacrificed. There is no neutral flat map of the Earth. Every projection keeps some relationships and breaks others. The deeper question is not whether a map distorts. It is who chooses the distortion, where it is displayed, and what people begin to believe because they see it every day. Soon governments wanted more than a world image. They wanted their own territory measured field by field. In 18th century Europe, national surveying turned maps into instruments of centralized power. After the Jacobite Rising of 1745, the British government needed better knowledge of the Scottish Highlands. The military wanted roads, settlements, passes, and terrain made visible. From that context emerged the institution later known as the Ordnance Survey. Its name still carries the language of weaponry. In France, the Cassini family used triangulation to build a national survey. Surveyors measured angles from fixed points and converted local knowledge into standardized state information. Imagine what that meant on the ground. A farmer understood a field through stones, trees, inherited agreements, and memories shared with neighbors. A survey transformed the same field into measurements and parcels readable by officials far away. Roads could be planned, troops could be moved, property disputes could be judged, taxes could be assessed, resources could be counted. Rebellious regions could be studied without depending entirely on local guides. The map made territory visible from the center of government, and what the state could see, it could organize. A solution becomes valuable. Value attracts power. Power builds rules. Maps were no longer records made after authority arrived. They were part of how authority arrived. They helped states replace overlapping customs with official boundaries, local names with standardized labels, and lived landscapes with administrative units. Once borders existed as lines in government documents, officials could move them faster than people could move their homes. In 1947, British rule in South Asia was ending. India and Pakistan were being created amid political conflict, communal fear, and enormous pressure. A boundary commission was ordered to divide Punjab and Bengal. Cyril Radcliffe, a British lawyer with little direct knowledge of India, led the process. He had only weeks. The line had to consider religious majorities, railways, canals, roads, districts, and competing political demands. No boundary could satisfy them all. Villages waited without knowing which country they would enter. Farmers wondered whether their fields and water systems would remain together. Families had relatives, workplaces, and sacred sites scattered across the territory. India and Pakistan became independent in mid-August. The boundary award was publicly announced 2 days later. For a brief, surreal period, people celebrated new nations without officially knowing where the border ran. Then the drawing became real. Millions moved across it in both directions. Roads and stations filled with displaced families. Communities were torn apart by fear and violence. Estimates of the dead vary, but the scale of suffering does not. The Radcliffe Line did not create every tension behind partition. Those tensions had deep roots. But the map hardened them into territorial fact. Ink divided railways, irrigation networks, markets, neighborhoods, and lives. The paper did not move. People did. This is the darkest authority a map can acquire. The power to reorganize human beings while appearing to do nothing more than mark a boundary. Yet paper maps still waited silently to be read. The maps that followed would begin to calculate, update, and watch. Modern mapping is no longer simply an image of space. It is active infrastructure. The global positioning system began as a military satellite network. For years, the United States reduced civilian accuracy through selective availability. In May 2000, that degradation was switched off. and civilian GPS accuracy improved dramatically. The episode revealed that location was not merely knowledge, it was a capability controlled by whoever owned the system above the Earth. Today, satellites, phones, companies, advertisers, and governments exchange location data. A digital map can find the fastest route, rank nearby businesses, redirect traffic, define a service zone, or warn that a border is approaching. It can also record where a device has been, infer routines, and turn movement into data. Even political boundaries are not always displayed identically. In disputed regions, platforms may show different lines or names depending on the country from which a user is viewing. Two people can open what appears to be the same service and receive different political realities. Ancient mapmakers tried to place the world into human hands. Modern mapping systems place human movement inside databases. We created maps because we feared being lost. Then we gave them the power to tell us where we belonged. A line on clay could mark a river. A line on a chart could guide a ship home. A line on an imperial document could claim a continent. A line through a province could divide families. A digital line can determine access, jurisdiction, movement, and what version of reality appears on a screen. A map is never only a picture of the world. It is a decision about what the world contains, what it is called, where it ends, and who has the authority to decide. The strange part is not that humans drew lines across the world. The strange part is that the world eventually learned to obey them. Subscribe, leave a like, and tell us what ordinary object, invention, habit, or system we should uncover next, because the forces that shape history are usually the ones hiding in plain sight.